Welcome to SysEng Quick. My name is John, and today we're going to do something a little different. At this point in the series, I've covered most of the broad Ansible topics and shown concrete examples illustrating their use. Now I'd like to shift focus towards using Ansible to work on a specific project. I find doing concrete work with a new tool is the best way to truly learn it. The project we're going to begin today will replace the ATH proxy host. I've got future video ideas involving this new host, so rather than build it off camera, I'll do it all with Ansible here. I want to use Ansible to do the following things. 1. To create a Fedora Cloud VM in my Proxmox host. 2. To configure the host as a NAT router using nftables. And 3. To install Podman to host a hashicorp vault instance to store secrets. Even though we just learned how to use Ansible Vault in the last video, there are benefits to using an API-based secrets management system, and we'll still use Ansible Vault to store our API tokens. I decided to use Fedora Server 40 here because of nftables. Docker doesn't support it, but Netavark, the networking stack used in Podman, recently added support. I hope it's true because I haven't tested it. I was originally considering using Rocky Linux 9 or the newly released Ubuntu 24.04 until I checked the package versions. No other non-rolling release distros seem to be packaging the new version other than Fedora. This project will probably span at least a couple of videos. So let's get started. I'm going to start by making a new Ansible collection called sysengquick.proxmox. I'm thinking once this project is complete that I'll publish it to Ansible Galaxy. So we've used Ansible Galaxy collection init to create our collection skeleton. Let's go ahead and go into the collections directory and see what needs to be fixed. We're going to go into the galaxy.yaml. We're going to fix a few things in here. We'll go ahead and save this, and I'm just going to open up the other collection, and I can copy over information from there. So let's start by copying over my author. There we go. Description is going to be Proxmox collection to build virtual machines from cloud images. Our license is going to be GPL3, so I'll change that. We don't need that. The tags is Linux. We do have one dependency. We are dependent on the community general collection where our Proxmox modules are, so we'll put that in there. As for the repository, this is going to be pretty close. So actually, right now it's in the same repo. I may change that later. I guess we'll see. But right now we're just going to copy paste all of these things. So same thing for the home page and the issue tracker. Okay, I think everything else should look good. Does that make Ansible Lint happy? Almost. What is it angry about right now? No changelog. We'll get to that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and make one of those. We're in the Proxmox role, and I'll make a change. That's the wrong one. We'll make a changelog in here. So this is version 1.0.0, and it will be released. I have no idea when. So I'll come back and fix that once I actually make the release. Okay, so that looks okay now. If we save this file, we shouldn't have any more issues with the Galaxy file. Yep. Now in meta, we've got the runtime thing, which says it needs Ansible 2.16. At least that's as much as I know about this file. So we'll put that in there. Okay, our collection is now ready to be written. I think we should set up another inventory file for our Proxmox server. Let's go to our File Explorer and make a new inventory. I'm going to call it proxmox.yaml. So in here we have Proxmox hosts, and I have a single host. Don't need any subgroup, so we'll just do host under here. And my server is named this. And we'll need to give it some information, like my Ansible user. Let's go ahead and save that, and let's try it out. If I do ansible-m ping all with my inventory file of proxmox.yaml, it says that it's unreachable because we had permission denied. I don't have an SSH key set up, so I'll need to supply my password on the command line. We'll use the -k option to do that. Okay, so now it is working. However, there is one change we could make to make supplying the password a bit easier. We can place this right into our inventory. So let's say the Ansible password is, I'm going to use a vault variable here. So I'm going to say Proxmox server user password. And I also need the become pass, which is not spelled out password because why be consistent, right? Okay, so we'll use vault encrypted values to store our password and my become password. So let's go ahead and make a vars file. It wouldn't make much sense to put them in the playbook because we're not even using a playbook yet. So I'm going to place them down here in the vars vault folder. We'll make a new file over here, and I'll call it proxmox.yaml. And in here, I've got the vault variable. And what did I call that? Proxmox server user password? Yeah, I think it's that. So I'll just put in whatever my password is, and we'll encrypt that. Okay, that's encrypted with the correct password, so let's try this again. If we go to the command line, we don't need the -k option, but I do need to supply those additional variables. We can do that with the -e flag, and to read a file, we use the @ symbol. So it's going to be vars/vault/proxmox.yaml. And there we go. We no longer need our password to connect. We have encrypted it with our vault, and our vault password is in that file that we have in our ansible.config file. So our inventory looks pretty good now. I've temporarily commented out our old inventory and replaced it with our new inventory. That way I won't have to supply the inventory flag on the CLI when we run these playbooks. Let's go ahead and make our first playbook. I've called it Create Cloud VM. So we're going to make our first task, or our first play, and I'm going to call that Create Cloud VM in Proxmox. The hosts are going to be our Proxmox host, and we aren't going to gather facts. For our task, the first thing I want to do is download the cloud image file. We'll need that to be able to build our virtual machine. So download cloud image, and we're going to import a role to do that. The name of the role is going to be sysengquick proxmox cloud image. I've made a few files for that role, so here is our task file in the cloud image. So let's go ahead and make some tasks over here. The first thing we'll need to do is make sure the directory we're going to download our cloud images exists. So we'll start by creating the image directory. We're going to use the Ansible built-in file module to do that. And we'll give it the state of directory, which means it will make sure that whatever path we put here is a directory. So the path is going to be cloud image dest. And then our mode is going to be 0700. In other words, it'll only be readable by the owner. No one else will have any permissions. I think we need to become root for this because this path will not be writable by whatever user we're at. Let's go ahead and add this to our defaults. Let's go into our defaults file. And the default path is going to be var lib vz images 0. But I'm actually going to override that in the one that we're working on. So over here in our cloud VM, for now, I want to supply a different path. it's going to be tank nas proxmox images 0. Okay, and I need to put that in a var section, not just a bare word, so that looks better. Let's go back to our task file, and the next thing I want to do is download the checksum file. This will allow us to verify that our image was downloaded properly. Unfortunately, there are a couple of kinds of checksum files for cloud images, and the module we're going to use for Ansible doesn't handle both of them properly. So we're going to need to do some filtering on our own with the checksum file. So to start off, we're going to make a block. And I'm going to say delete temp file at the end of the block. We haven't seen this use of a block before, but blocks can have additional sections, such as the always section. Tasks in the always section run no matter what happens in the block. Usually, when a task fails, the entire playbook stops. But we want to make sure that no matter what happens inside this block, we're going to remove the temp file I'm about to create. We're going to download the checksum file to this temp file. So we'll start by creating our temp file for the checksum. We can do that with the built-in temp file module. And we don't need to supply any arguments because it doesn't matter what the file is called or where it is. So I need to use the register keyword to register the output of our temp file in a variable that I'm going to call temp file. Next, we can download the checksum file. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to use the getURL module to download our checksum. The destination is going to be tempfile.path. The mode doesn't really matter, so I'll just say 644. And for our URL, I'll say it's going to be cloud image URL checksum. Now we need to download this file to the local host, not the Proxmox host, because we're going to have to read this file into memory, which means we're going to use the lookup plugin. Lookup plugins can't look up files on remote hosts. So we'll use this on the remote host. So to do that, we're going to use the delegate to property, and we'll say localhost. So if you use delegate to, it runs it on whatever host is listed here rather than the host it was running as. So we'll be on the Proxmox host, but instead of running it there, we're going to run this task on localhost instead. And finally, I'm going to add one more clause. It's the run once clause. And I want to say we only run this task once. If we have more than one Proxmox server, we don't need to download this checksum multiple times. Once is enough. Now we can use that checksum to download the cloud image file. So I want to say download cloud image, and again we're going to use the getURL, and our destination is going to be cloud image dest. This is our directory where all of our cloud images will be stored. The mode doesn't really matter, but we need to specify it, so I'll say 0644. And our URL is going to be cloud image URL. Now we need to give it the checksum, which I'll give it the checksum variable, which we haven't figured out yet, but we will shortly. I also need to become true because we can't write to this directory if we're not root, so we'll go ahead and do that. And now we'll add some variables. The first one's going to be that checksum. So this is going to be a Jinja expression. We're going to start by looking up the information in that file. It's going to be Ansible built-in file, and then we'll say I want the file that's at tempfile.path. Now we're going to pass this into a Jinja filter. The filter is going to be Ansible built-in regex. And we're going to supply the regular expression as a variable regex, which we'll define shortly. We're going to pass that filter into another filter. Actually, hang on. This should be regex search, not regex. Okay, now I want to pass it into another filter. This is going to be regex replace because I need to transform the line we found with a few different properties. So we'll give it the replace property, and the first argument is the regular expression. So it's going to be regex comma replace, and that should be good for our checksum. So now let's define our regular expression. So in this file that the URL module can't handle. It starts with SHA, and then it's going to be either 256 or 512. And then we're going to give it a literal open parenthesis, so we have to escape that in a regex. And then I want to add the cloud init file, so we'll say cloud image file. And after that, we're going to have an equal sign, and then we need to get any characters that are hexadecimal, because that's what SHA sums are encoded in. Okay, there's our regular expression, and now we do our replacement. And I want to take this line, I want to turn it into SHA with the first part there. So it's either going to be 256 or it'll be 512. And it's going to be colon and the SHA sum, which is we get from this capture group. So we should end up with a checksum that looks like SHA 256 colon and then the SHA sum. Okay, so if we have all of that, we should be able to get the URL. Now let's go ahead and make our always clause. So let's go down here, and I believe it should be right over here. And it needs to line up with the block, so right down here, which I think it's actually one in farther, yeah, isn't it? Yeah, okay. There we go. That's better. Okay, so I want to delete temp file at the end. We can use the file module for that. And the state this time is going to be absent. In other words, I don't want it here. And the path is going to be tempfile.path. Okay, I believe this should all be good. Let's go ahead and try it out. Of course, before we can do that, we'll need to define some of these variables that I didn't define yet. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to need a couple of URL properties. So I think we're going to make these with some vars, not defaults, because we're going to take the defaults and append them. So let's go ahead and make some vars files. So we'll do vars main.yaml. And in this file, I want the cloud image URL, and that's going to be the cloud image URL base with a / and then the cloud image file. Okay, that looks good. And then I want the cloud image URL checksum, which is going to be the base, and then the cloud image checksum file. Okay, there are our two URLs. So let's go ahead and go into our default section, and let's add a few more defaults. So I want the cloud image URL base. That's going to be a string. And I'm going to copy it from over here. So here is the base image of where our Fedora cloud image will be. We'll make this a bit more generic later on, but for now, we're going to kind of hard code some of these things. So now I want to do cloud image file checksum. Again, I'll give it a multi-line string, and here is the name of the checksum file. And finally, cloud image file. And that's going to be this long string. Okay, now I think we can try things out. Let's go to the terminal. We'll run Ansible playbook sysengquick.proxmox.create VM. Cloud VM. We need to add the extra vars too, so we'll say vars vault proxmox.yaml. Okay. Everything says it worked. Let's go ahead and see if those files are on our host now. We'll go ahead and log into our host. We'll go to the tank nax proxmox images directory, and we'll do sudo ls into this directory 0. And yeah, it appears to be there. And it must have passed the checksum, because if it didn't, we would have failed the test. So this all looks like it worked. Okay, now we should be ready to create our virtual machine. So let's go ahead and make a new role, and we'll say create VM. We're going to import our new role, and it's going to be sysengquick proxmox, maybe create VM. I don't know. Okay, let's go and start working on that role. So in our roles folder, we'll make the create VM role. We'll have some tasks, main.yaml, And let's go ahead and make our task file. Let's go ahead and add our first task. It's going to be create cloud VM. Okay, so in here, we're going to use the Proxmox KVM module from Community General. And these actually, it's not going to be so hard to do this. It's just there's a lot of options here, and they're just very specific to Proxmox. So I'm mostly just going to write them down, and I'll try to cover them as best I can. So here we need to specify the API information. So for that, I want to specify some variables. I'm just going to prefix their variable with Proxmox underscore. So there's the API host. There is an API user. There is an API token ID. So let's go ahead and fix that. API token ID. Okay, there is an API token secret. So let's get API token secret. Now this is actually a private piece of information. That's going to be inside our vault. So I'll place that right over there. Everything else though, I think should be good. Yeah, that should be good. Okay, so what is next? We're going to give it the name of our virtual machine, which for now I'm going to hard code like we've been hard coding everything else. So what I'm going to call this proxy.ath local technoplaza.net. Okay, we're going to tell it that I want the QEMU agent to be enabled, so we'll say 1 to that. I don't want the memory balloon, so we'll tell it not to do that. The boot order is going to be SCSI0. The cloud init password should be something secure, so I am a secure password. And then exclamation point. There we go. Very secure now. Our CI user can be Ansible. The number of cores, I'll just say 4 for now. CPU will be the same as the host CPU. The IDE configuration needs a cloud init drive. So we're going to put this in the local storage. It seems to be quoted. The local storage, it's going to be a cloud init drive. The format will be qcode2. Okay, the IP configuration for the first interface is going to be IP equals DHCP. We'll give it 4 gigs of RAM. In the network, we want to give it 1 network card. The model is going to be, let's see here. The model will be VirtIO. The bridge is going to be VMBR0. I'm going to use the Proxmox firewall, and we'll keep the bridge MTU, or so we'll match the MTU to the underlying bridge. Okay, the node is going to be our Proxmox node, which I want to say is just Proxmox node, and we will make that a variable. And now we have an OS type, which for Linux on Proxmox is always L26. Now we have our SCSI settings, and SCSI0 is going to be, I'm going to place the disk on the local storage pool, and we say :0 to import the disk. We use the import from property to tell it where to pull from. And I want to use my NAS storage, and that's why we changed it from being var lib vz to tank NAS, because that's where my NAS storage is. So it's going to be :0. We're going to need to quote this, aren't we? I think we're going to need to quote this. Slash. And then I need to find the right image because I don't have that here. So let me go grab my image file. I place that in my cloud image defaults. So it's going to be this image file. Let's go ahead and copy that. Okay, that looks okay. So what's the next property? The format is going to be qcode2. That's the format that the disk is going to be in, not the format the disk image is in. They can be different. So we've got the format for the disk I'm taking from. I want to enable IO thread. I want to enable discard. We'll say discard equals on. And I am using SSD, so I want to turn on SSD emulation for my drive. Okay, that's a long thing, but it should be all good now. So what is next? Need to enable the serial port. The first serial port is going to be on a socket. We're going to give it some SSH keys, and I'm just going to give it our ATH key for now. We might change that later. For VGA, it's going to be serial 0, and I think that is everything. So all I need to do now is register the output of this to get the VM ID. So let's register the result of this. We'll make a new task, display the result, and we will take the resulting thing and see what we get. So unless I typoed something, we should be able to build this host now. Why don't we go try that out? We'll go to the command line, Ansible playbook, sysng-quick.proxmox.create_VM. And actually, no, we can't run it yet. I didn't give it any of these Proxmox variables. We need to define another extra vars file. So let's go ahead and do that. So in my vars file, I'm going to make one called Proxmox API. And we'll go set up all of those variables. So we're going to have Proxmox API host is going to be my server name. Proxmox API user is root at PAM. Proxmox API token ID is Ansible. And I already have the API token secret, although actually it might be better to define this here. So let's go ahead and do that. Token secret should be vault.proxmox API token secret. And finally, my Proxmox node is called PVE. Okay, let's go back to main and let's go ahead and take that out. And I think that should be everything. So let's try running this with some extra variables. So we need the vars proxmox API.yaml and also vars vault proxmox.yaml. And yeah, that should be good, I hope. Let's find out. Can't create this. Did I do create cloud VM? I did, okay. Oh, that's right, I was doing the download image first. That's okay. And you can see it didn't re-download the file. So that's fine. It says there's no module named Proxmoxer. That's a little bit odd. The problem there is I didn't tell it to run this task on localhost. I told it to run it on the host that we already had up there. So let's go change our playbook. I don't want just a new task here. I want a new play. We haven't seen this before, but I've always told you that a playbook is a collection of plays. We've just never had more than one in the same playbook. Now we're going to. So create VM in Proxmox host, or maybe on Proxmox host. That sounds better. So the host this time is localhost. We still won't gather facts, and we'll give it some more tasks. That looks pretty good. We're not creating a cloud VM in Proxmox anymore though, so we should fix that. Download cloud image for Proxmox. Okay, now maybe we can run this task. Let's try it one more time. Let's go ahead and run the template. There we go. It created the cloud ID. Yeah, everything looks pretty good. VM proxy deployed with 109. Hey, that sounds pretty good. So I now know that I have my VM ID in my result. That's what we need for the next task. Let's go ahead and use that. So back in my task file, rather than displaying the result, we're going to register that VM ID, just in case we need it somewhere else. save VMID. So we will do a set fact, and we're going to say, I want to set the Proxmox VMID. And we're going to use the result.vmid, or, VMID. Either one works, it's fine. And our last task is to expand our disk. So let's go ahead and do that. We need to resize the disk from the tiny cloud disk we give us to a normal size disk. So again, we're going to copy some of the parameters up here. We're going to use all of these API parameters in this call as well. And then the disk is going to be SCSI0. The VMID is going to be Proxmox VMID. And the size is going to be 32 gigs. And finally, the state will be resized. Okay, let's do one more run of the playbook and see if everything goes okay. Okay, we resized the disk. So let's go to our browser and see if things actually worked. It certainly looks to work. Here's that VMID 109. Our hardware all looks correct. Let's go ahead and start the VM and see what happens. We'll hit start and we'll go to the console. It's booting up Fedora. Yeah, this looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and go grab that password, and I'll see if I can possibly type in that super complicated password that I made. Oddly, I don't seem to be getting a prompt on the console. Let's see if we can log in through some other mechanism. Let's go back to VS Code. We'll go to our terminal, and let's just ping this. So can we ping this host? Well, not from here we can't. Let's go try to SSH into this. So if I go Ansible at Fedora local technoplaza.net. Okay, the problem was I forgot to set the SCSI controller. It was set to one that there's no driver for in Fedora. So now that I've fixed that, everything should be working okay. And you can see we do even have a serial prompt, or we will once Cloud.init is done upgrading things. I'm surprised there's so much to upgrade in Fedora 40, but they make new packages all the time. So we'll give it a minute for it to update things, and we'll try to log in. Actually, let's see if we can do that from the terminal. Okay, well, I'm not sure what's going on with DNS yet, but I'll fix that in a bit. Let's go ahead and add our key. So I think it's in, I think it's the ATH key. And now, can I log into this host? Yes, I can. So there we go. There were a few missteps getting here, but we do have our Fedora system there. I would consider this largely a success. Real quick before we go, here is the fix for the SCSI property. I should have supplied this, virt.io SCSI single. And if I had done that, it would have worked from the beginning. Okay, I think that's a pretty good wrapping up point for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It really helps out the channel, and I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Come back and see us next time, when I suspect we'll be doing some refactoring to make this role more generic. I always like to start with a proof of concept, but now that I have one, let's make it a lot better than it is right now. Thanks for watching. See you next time.